Welcome to Chapter 7 of the First Hebrew Primer. Let's dive in and take a look at the vocabulary for this week. Starting in the upper right, the first word is a pronoun, atem, and it's a feminine plural. See that FP? It's a feminine plural pronoun. This is actually not very common in the Hebrew Bible. It'd be addressing a group, a female group. So you see this in like Song of Songs or in the Book of Ruth, a few other places too. But aten is how you would say that. The next word down is the verbal root, yashav. And remember, we pronounce these roots just by adding a vowels between the first two letters. So just yashav, and that means to sit or reside. Then we have the word lo, which is a negative particle, lo, and it means no or not. The fourth word down is lechem, lechem. Notice that it's accented on the first syllable. This is the word for bread or food. A good way to remember this is a famous town in Israel is Beit Lechem, which means house of bread, lechem. So Bethlehem, that maybe helps you remember both house and bread to get the name of to get those vocabulary words down. Beneath that we have a participle lifnei, lifnei, and it means before or in front of. Below that we have another Hebrew verbal root, lakach, and it means to take. And then below that, we have a preposition, al, which means on, upon, over. It can mean against too at times. As we mentioned in last week's lecture, the prepositions have a broader range of meaning than they do in English. So these are some good glosses to start with, but just know it can be there are even more possibilities than just those three. Okay, another verbal root in the upper left, akal, it means to eat, akal. And then one of the most common words in the Hebrew Bible below that, amar, is to say or speak, amar. And then we have a pronoun, anachnu, anachnu. And that is the third person plural pronoun, we. And that can be used for masculine or feminine. Then we have the first person singular pronoun, ani or anochi. There's two forms of this, ani or anochi, and it means I. Then we have the second person singular pronoun, at, and that means you, and it's feminine singular, so a feminine you. And then we have ata, ata, which is a masculine singular form of the word you. So imagine pointing at your sister and you'd say at. And if you point at your brother, you'd say ata. So at, ata. And then below that, we have the word for you, plural, masculine plural, like y'all. And that's atem, y'all. Okay, so that's the vocab for this week. You've now learned all the subject pronouns, and this next slide is just an example of what you've learned in the vocabulary or what you will learn this week when you add the vocabulary for this week. This is the paradigm for all these subject pronouns. Again, they're only used as a subject of a sentence for the most part. And you can see it here. Who is he? He is she. Ata is you, masculine singular. At is you, feminine singular. Ani or anochi is I. Hem or hema is they, masculine plural. Hein or hena is they, feminine plural. Then atem is y'all, second masculine plural. Atena is second feminine plural. And anachnu is the first common plural. All right, we're going to talk more about verbs. Now, we've already learned some things about verbs. And in this slide and the next two slides, I'm going to give you more background than your textbook has. I think it might be helpful for you. You don't have to memorize any of this for the quiz. This is more just to help you think about what we're learning with verbs. And then I'll tell you what you actually do need to know for this course. So hopefully this will help you kind of think about what we're learning. And then you'll be better set up to learn what we're covering this week. So if you want to translate a Hebrew verb, you really need to know three things about it. The first is, what is its root? We talked in previous lectures about how Hebrew verbs are built on a triconsonantal or three-consonant root. And that's like in your vocabulary. You're learning the roots of Hebrew verbs, like malach or yashav or whatever. So you need to know the root. because the root has the semantic meaning of the word, right? Malak means to rule or reign. Yashab means to sit or dwell. That's where you get the meaning of the word. But you also need to know the conjugation. That is should it be translated as a past, a present, a future, a command? Like, how do you translate, what conjugation is the verb? And there are, and scholars actually still debate this. In my counting, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 conjugations. Just wanted to double check my number there. There's the perfect, which is what we're learning right now. There's the imperfect. And then there's actually 2 different kinds of infinitives. There's an imperative, a participle, and then these last 2 conjugations have a variety of terms that they're known by. The first here is vayaktol. That form is also sometimes called a vav consecutive imperfect, and sometimes it's called a past narrative tense. And then there's the vikatal, or the vav consecutive perfect. So those are all the conjugations. So what you need to know the root. When you translate a word, you also need to know what conjugation is it. And right now we're only focused on the perfect conjugation. And then you also need to know the stem. Stem is something that we don't have in English when it comes to verbs, but the Hebrew verbal system is built on it. You'll be introduced to this in your textbook much later on, but I think it's helpful to get the concept now. Right now, and for the next several weeks, we are only going to be in the Kal stem. So everything you're learning about verbs right now is in the Kal stem. But there are also a number of other stems, as you can see, and they have strange names. There's reasons for those names. I'll explain that in just a minute. But what does the stem indicate? Well, the stem indicates or tells you really 2 things about the verb. First, it tells you the verbal voice. Verbal voice is the verb active, passive, or reflexive. So the Kal stem is an active stem verb, which means the subject of the verb does the action of the verb. So like, I hit the ball, right? That's an active verb. I hit. I'm the one doing the hitting. The ball is the direct object. The Kal stem is an active voice. The Nifal stem is a passive voice verb. So passive voice would be, I was hit by the ball, where now the subject of the verb is receiving the action of the verb, right? And then there's reflexive, which would be, I hit myself with the ball. That would be the subject of the verb is both the actor and receiving the action and the object of the action. And the Hippael is a reflexive voice stem. So is the Nifal in some cases as well. So one of the things that Hebrew stem tells you is it tells you the verbal voice. Is it active, passive, or reflexive? But the other thing it communicates is and this is where it's kind of strange, it communicates the type of action. So the Kal stem is the most simple action, like I hit the ball. That's a very simple verb, basic meaning. The Hifil stem communicates causative action. Maybe something like I caused the ball to be hit. Or, we'll cover this more in detail when we get to the Hifil stem. But, like, for example, one verb in the Kal stem might mean I go to church. I go. But let's say you're bringing a friend. You might say, use the same verb, put it in the Hifil stem, and say, I brought my friend to church. It's the same verb. In English, we use 2 different verbs for that. In Hebrew, it's the same verb, but you use a different stem. So that's kind of like how these stems work. It's the verbal voice and the type of action. For now, we're only covering the Kal stem. One helpful way of thinking about this is sort of on this like XY chart, where the Kal stem is simple action in the active voice, right? I hit the ball. The Nifal is either passive or reflective voice of the same type of simple action. I was hit by the ball, or I hit myself with the ball. The Hifil is active voice causative action, like I caused the ball to be hit, or and then the Hofil is the passive voice of the same meaning of the Hifil. So the ball was caused to be hit, turning it into a passive. And then the last category is probably the hardest to get your head around, the PL, what does intensive action mean? And we'll cover that in a future lecture, but you get the idea. You don't have to memorize any of this right now. This is just background for what we're learning. What we're focused on is simply the perfect conjugation in the cal stem. And that's really all we're focused on right now. With that being said, this is something you do need to learn for the quiz for this week, and that is the paradigm of the cal stem. Your textbook calls it the pa'al stem, which is a perfectly good term for this as well. Most grammarians call it the cal stem. I think you should learn both terms because you will see both. Actually, you more often will see cal stem. Very rarely will you see the pa'al as the name of this stem, but they're the same thing. So what your textbook calls the pa'al stem, most other people call the cal stem. They're interchangeable. They mean the same thing. You'll hear me use both. So you do need to know and memorize this conjugation of the perfect tense. So here we're taking the root shamar and we're inflecting it. So we've already learned the third masculine singular. Shamar means he guarded, right? That's the third masculine singular. The third feminine singular we've also already learned, and that's shamara, and that's she guarded, right? Third feminine singular. And we've learned the third common plural, shamaru, they guarded. So now what we're going to add to that is all the other conjugations. So a second masculine singular, if you want to say you guarded, with the subject being a second masculine singular person, you'd say shamarta, shamarta. You guarded feminine singular, second feminine singular is shamart. And this you pronounce, there's two, shavas in a row at the end here. You just leave them both silent. It's just shamart. And then the first common singular is shamarti. That's I guarded, shamarti. Then the second masculine plural is shamartem. That's y'all guarded, you guarded. And then second feminine plural is shamarten. That's y'all guarded, feminine plural. And then the we guarded is shamarnu, shamarnu. So let me just read through the whole paradigm, and then I'll give you a little tip to help you memorize it. So it's shamar, shamara, shamarta, shamart, shamarti, shamaru, shamartem, shamarten, shamarnu. Now, the way that you know that this verb is a perfect conjugation is the ending. The comments hey, either no ending in the third masculine singular, the comments hey ending in the third feminine singular, the tav comments, the ta in the second masculine singular. It's these endings, this set of endings is how you know it's a perfect. And those endings are going to be the same in every stem. We're only learning the cal stem or the pa'al stem now, but they'll be the same endings in every stem. The way that you know it's a pa'al stem or a cal stem verb is the a vowel under the first root consonant. So that's how you know it's a cal. Perfect. So here's my tip for memorizing the endings. The endings, it's just a little chant. And so you have to know the order that this goes in, right? I go from third masculine singular, so 3, 3, 2, 2, 1 singular, then 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1 plural. So that's the order this is in. And we just chant the ending. So the first is, you have to know the first is blank, right? Third masculine is blank. Third feminine singular is a. And then second masculine singular is ta. Second feminine singular is t. First common singular is t. So you kind of get how those endings are going. And the chant is basically this. Blank, and then you go ta ta ti u temtenu. So think blank. Ta ta ti u temtenu. Ta ta ti u temtenu. It's a good way to memorize it. Again, you have to know what the parsing is so you know which, how they line up. But just memorize that. And I would, in addition to that, memorize all the vowel pointing on these as well, so that you get this down, really down cold. There's really not a lot of paradigms that we're going to ask you to memorize in this course. This is one of them. Make sure you get this down. Now, we've learned the subject pronouns, and now we've learned the verbs as they're inflected. This is really just a way of showing how those go together. Now, you can have a verb without a subject pronoun. You actually don't need subject pronouns with the verbs because the subject is embedded within the verb itself. So if we say shamarnu, that by itself means we guarded. Now you can also use a subject pronoun with it, anachnu shamarnu. And when you do, that's typically emphatic because you don't need it grammatically. But this is how this lines up. So this is the word we, anachnu, with shamarnu. So you have to match the inflection of the verb with the inflection of the pronoun. Here's the second person plural masculine, atem shamarten, aten shamarten. Or the second feminine plural, aten shamarten. One of the things to notice here is there are some similarities between the subject pronouns and the endings of the perfect. So, anachnu, that ends in nu, shamarnu. Do you hear that similarity? Similarly, in the first common singular, you have ani, shamarti. See that E ending? Ani, shamarti. Or ata, shamarta. At, shamart. So you can kind of hear some of those similarities. Atem, shamartem. So that might help you memorize both the independent personal pronouns and the conjugation. Okay, you might wonder, well, wait a minute, what if the perfect verb has a guttural? I'm glad you asked, because you may remember that gutturals can't take the dot or the dagesh. Now, there isn't really any dots in the perfect conjugation of the cal, so you don't really have to worry about that. But they also can't take a vocal shva. Instead, they take a combination vowel. So what happens in those cases? Well, let's take a look at it. So on the right-hand side, I have just a regular old strong verb. I use the verb katal here, which means to kill. Katal. And then you can see some various weak verbs, where you have if the third root consonant is a guttural, if the second root consonant is a guttural, and if the first root consonant is a guttural. You don't have to memorize this. This is just being aware of some of these changes that take place. And really the main thing is anytime you see a vocal shava, like here when you put this tem ending on the verb, the first vowel reduces to a vocal shava. If it's a first guttural root, they can't take a vocal shava, so they take this combination vowel, the hatef tak. So it's just really not getting thrown off by that. And you can see the same thing here in the third feminine singular. This chart has in red anywhere where there's a difference. In third guttural, sometimes you add an extra A vowel in there to help you, say the word. So that's really it. Not too difficult. Okay, last thing for this chapter is negative sentences. How do you say no in Hebrew? So it's really just the word lo. And it changes a verb, or it can also be a verbless clause, from being a positive statement to being a negative statement. So, for example, we have Avraham halach el ha'ir. Abraham went to the city. Well, what if we wanted to say Abraham didn't go to the city? You just say Avraham lo shalach el ha'ir. Abraham did not go to the city. It's worth pointing out that in English we have to add this helping verb did to negate the verb. That's just a quirk of English. Abraham did not go to the city. The old King James might say Abraham went not to the city. So you don't have to add that extra word in, but in English, in modern English, it's much more smooth to say did not go. Or you have, here's another example. Amadnu baderech, we stood on the road. What if you want to negate that? Lo amadnu baderech, we did not stand in the road. So that's it for this week. For this chapter. If you have any questions, please reach out in the course discussion board forum.